Taking aim at lead pipes and safer water. Welcome back to Techstination. I'm Fred Fishkin. Joining us is environmental expert Chad Seidel, and from Brita, head of community water systems, Dan Tudesco. Hi, Dan and Chad.
Morning, Fred. Chad here.
Morning, Fred. Dan here. Nice to be here.
Well, safe drinking water for all seems like a no-brainer, I suppose, but there are still many places where that is lacking. Chad, maybe start off with a bit of an overview.
Yeah, that's right. We all share that common goal of everybody having safe, affordable, and reliable water. But we do need to recognize our historical practices of supplying water to homes and buildings often used lead pipes to connect the pipe in the street to those homes or buildings. And those lead pipes, as well as sometimes fixtures inside of buildings and homes, can be the source of lead. And lead, we know, can cause some serious health problems. There's no safe level of lead. And so we recently conducted some research to better understand not only the extent of that nationally, but also what can be done to address it. And our findings were that oftentimes smaller water systems are more likely to be impacted by this concern than what EPA has recently estimated. But good thing is that there's some great efforts by water utilities and communities to implement the use of point of use filtration. So those homes, it will take longer for those utilities to replace those lead pipes, will get protection by using a filter earlier on. And that gives everybody a chance to have equal public health protection, whether they're the first house to have their lead pipe removed or the last.
I suppose one of the big issues is where these pipes are located underground and having to dig things up, maybe tear up streets, sidewalks, etc.
Absolutely. Years ago, many communities actually had it mandated that lead pipes were the material of choice to connect from the pipe to the home. And in several of those locations, the records, as you can imagine, from decades and decades ago, aren't readily available or perhaps reliable to tell us where those were. And so you're right, it's a big lift for water utilities to figure out where those are. It takes a lot of engagement from their customers, the community members, to do that. And just recently, all those water utilities had to submit to their state regulatory agency and US EPA their initial inventory of where all those lead service lines are located. Some have done that completely and they know exactly every detail for every connection. Others have still some unknowns that they're going to have to work on over the coming years to resolve, to really inform every last one, whether it's lead, and if it is lead, based upon the new regulatory action EPA took, replace those lead service lines within the coming 10 years.
Dan, what are some of the effects that you can tell us about of lead contamination in water?
So unfortunately, here as we mark National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week, it's important to know that lead contaminated water is harmful to all of us, but it's particularly problematic for some of our most vulnerable populations like children, infants, and elderly. It can cause developmental delays, reduced IQ, and other impacts like kidney disease and high blood pressure. So what's important to remember is that as these long-term fixes are underway to reduce lead risk in our communities and at our homes via lead service lines or lead pipes, we need to be implementing solutions as communities that can immediately reduce the threat of lead contamination in our water today.
What might some of those solutions look like?
Absolutely. So there's a variety of options for consumers and residents, Fred. But one of the things we work with communities is what are some effective and cost-efficient solutions that can scale when you're talking about thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of residents. And so we at Brita here today work with over 200 communities on implementing point of use or pitcher filter solutions that anyone at home can run under a sink and feel confident that they're getting as big of a lead reduction benefit as possible. Our products are certified to reduce 99% of lead, and communities obviously want to make sure that their residents have every tool possible to make sure that the lead reaching them is ultimately as reduced as possible from the threat of lead.
And do you have different solutions? A lot of us are very familiar with the Brita pitchers. Are there other solutions? As you mentioned, under sink. Is there something along those lines as well, or what can you tell us?
Sure. So one of the concerns we hear from communities is what's going to be universally applicable to everyone and something that they can afford. And what we find is typically communities are asking for that pitcher filter or something that they can mount on their faucet. Unfortunately, those faucet mounts are not always compatible with some of the wands and different types of fixtures that are in homes. So that pitcher filter is going to be universally compatible. And it's our Brita Elite solution. So it's a light blue color that you want to look for. That's the product that's certified to reduce 99% of lead.
And of course, there are people who have refrigerators that provide water and ice cubes and things like that. And I guess they need to be especially cautious as well.
The approach that consumers can use, like Dan mentioned, is there are specific certifications for these, and NSF provides information on that. Those certifications are readily available so consumers can know if the devices that they already have in their home meet that, and if they don't, what other devices can be used to meet those expectations.
What is some of the newer research that is out there on lead and this issue?
I'm glad to speak to the research that we've been conducting. Just recently published the results of our comparison of how EPA estimated the impacts of their recently finalized lead and copper rule improvements. And that new regulation builds upon historical regulations meant to reduce concentrations of both lead and copper in that tap, in your kitchen sink and throughout your homes and buildings. EPA, as I mentioned before, estimates as many as 9 million lead service lines in the US. And it's those lead service lines and other plumbing that contains lead that concerns us, that can cause the lead concentrations at the tap to increase. Our research found that smaller water systems, those serving fewer than 3,300 people, are more likely to have a greater impact from that than what EPA estimated, whereas larger water systems perhaps won't have as much an impact as EPA estimated. And so the real impact for that for your listeners is in smaller communities in particular. It's important to be aware, learn about the health implications of lead, check with your water system about if you have a lead service line connecting to your home. You can follow up with them. Larger water systems have websites that will show you your address and whether or not there is lead connecting you to their water system. And no matter that outcome, you can take action on your own by using point of use filtration to be able to reduce concentrations of lead exposure, which we see being applied in many water utilities across the country to proactively address the concerns. It's going to take many years to remove those lead service lines. EPA is expecting that to happen within 10 years now. And so we think that this is a good approach. So even the folks that have their service line replaced last, perhaps a decade from now, have the same health protection as those that have theirs replaced first, or perhaps have already had theirs replaced.
In addition to those community or regional websites, are there other places people can go for more information here?
So we'd encourage everyone to do two things. One is to visit your local water utility's website or call your local water utility and get information specific to your home. Your utility will be able to provide a set of steps to either identify if you have lead fixtures or a lead service line, and what you should do about it to help keep yourself and your family safe. The second is if you're looking for something more immediate. I know Chad mentioned this is going to be a long process, 10 to 15 years to ultimately replace everyone's lead service lines. Consider introducing a point of use solution like a pitcher filter into your home that's certified to reduce lead. I know, Fred, you mentioned refrigerator filters. There's all sorts of solutions out there. We obviously provide a great option for someone looking for that pitcher filter that they can use right after they pick it up from the store. So would encourage everyone to think about those two things to help keep themselves and their family safe.
Terrific. Dan and Chad, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thanks, Fred.
Thanks for having us, Fred.